Sometimes we have an ability to influence or persuade, but when it comes right down to it, you could point a gun at somebody's head and not have control. And look at how much of our lives is a struggle for controlling what's done to us. It's a fool's errand. Besides, it's already happened. How are you going to control something that's already downstream? What you want to control, what we wish to learn to be better and better at controlling, is our perception and response. It's not the stimulus.
Beyond politics and above organized religion, a moral authority exists known globally as the ageless wisdom. It is the study of consciousness, the mystery of awareness, which cannot be measured yet will not be denied. This podcast from Michael Benner's Ageless Wisdom Salon features lessons in metaphysics, mysticism, and esoteric philosophy. Those who attend live on Zoom may also participate in group meditation and roundtable discussions. Register for our newsletter at michaelbenner.com. Welcome to the Ageless Wisdom Mystery School with
Michael Benner.
Today I wanted to talk about control. I think that it's a major struggle for us, more than we may even realize. And yet I don't hear people using that word or talking about efforts to be in control, to manage your life. Well, we talk about solving problems, but rarely do we consider the extent to which we're creating the problems that we're trying to solve. And if we would just allow things to unroll, to unfold naturally, most of what we see as problems in our lives would either fade away, cease to be, or recede into context where they don't seem to be quite as problematic. But I think we contribute to our problems by the way in which we view them, and the way in which we view life altogether as some sort of struggle or effort to survive. And where does that come from, this drive, this effort to survive, this notion that survival is an effort? Well, it's instinctual, it's instinctive, it's very, very fundamental. And animals, of course, are driven by this instinct to survive, which includes bonding and kinship and procreation and, sex and sexuality and all of that. Animals even have their seasons where they go into heat, and it can be maddening for them. So strong is this inherent drive to survive. Every animal struggles. Every animal runs when you reach out for it. Even little insects and spiders will fly away or run away or creep and crawl away. So strong is this notion of survival. Well, we now have a lot of our needs are met. We're not scratching in the ground with a stick trying to grow enough food to eat. We're not hunter-gatherers anymore. We have supermarkets. Quite remarkable, stunning, the amount of food and how beautifully it's displayed. How nutritious it may be is another question altogether. Then, can I earn enough money, develop a revenue stream that assures me that I'll not only be able to buy the food that I need, but pay the rent, the mortgage, buy gas for the car, pay for the car, the insurance, gotta have a phone, yada, yada, yada. Survival becomes more of a financial thing, but it's still, for most of us, a struggle. And I'm going to challenge that idea, despite how patently obvious it may be. To what extent is it a struggle? That'll be my argument. Why do we struggle so? And can we, if not eliminate, at least minimize the anxiety and the stress and the worry that comes from just trying to keep our heads above water? Is there a more elegant, more graceful way to find true control in our lives. That's what I'd like to address today. Even the medical establishment have been very, very resistant to the whole idea of mind-body medicine, I'll call it, is beginning to recognize the value and benefit of guided imagery. That's what they call it. Sometimes visualization, sometimes positive thinking, usually just guided imagery. And I'd like to recommend to you also, there's so many books along this line. Getting Well Again, though 40 years old, is still a classic by Dr. Simonton. First initial O, Carl with a C, Simonton, Getting Well Again. He's a civil mind control graduate, a medical doctor, had a clinic for many, many years on the west side of L.A., Palos Verdes or Pacific Palisades, somewhere over there, Malibu maybe, and worked mostly as an oncologist with cancer patients. And the impact of guided imagery and visualization, though it varied widely, sometimes it works, absolute miracles. So much so that they would call the remission spontaneous when it wasn't spontaneous at all. Dr. Bernie Siegel, Love, Medicine, and Miracles, another medical doctor who understands the importance of attitude. And a third recommendation, a remarkable book by Dr. Candace Pert called The Molecules of Emotion. And she talks about, as I referred to in the meditation today, these receptor sites on every cell. And the allegory or analogy that's often used is that hormones are like a key that unlocks the various receptor sites as doorways, insulin being a good example. Those of us who've developed this autoimmune disease called diabetes have a high glucose tolerance. The sugar doors, for whatever reason, don't open unless you overwhelm them with insulin, and then they open up and begin to burn the sugar. Otherwise, the doors don't open, your sugar goes high, and it has a horrible corrosive effect on all the nerves in your body and leads to all those diabetes-related problems. But nobody ever said, how does the key get in? I get it, nice allegory, but how does the key get into the lock? How is it exactly that this protein, this peptide, this hormone, opens that lock? And Dr. Pert's work reveals that it has to do with emotion. And the more negative we are, the more depressed we are, the more we worry, the more cynical, just the more negative, the worse we do in this regard. The more resistant those doors are, not just the insulin doors, but there's hundreds of receptor sites on every single cell in your body. And the scores of hormones that, are like trying to unlock these doors. But if our general disposition is happy and loving and kind and carefree and generous and grateful and easygoing and trusting that life knows what it's doing and we don't have to struggle so much, accepting meaning to acknowledge reality and beginning there, acceptance is not the end, that this whole shift in attitude is significant in terms of these receptor sites being amenable or open to the various hormones. Molecules of Emotion, Dr. Candace Pert. Those are three wonderful books that I highly recommend if you wonder about the impact of guided imagery or visualization on your physical health. And finally, let me just say, it can't hurt. You're not going to do any damage by looking on the bright side, so to speak, turning lemons into lemonade, making the best of a bad situation. Here we are, looking out at the world. Our eyes point out to the world. Our ears are open to vibrations from the external material world. Our ability to smell and taste, to reach out and touch, all oriented toward the physical world. Forgive us if we believe our problems come at us from the physical world. Forgive us if we believe, therefore, that our happiness comes from mastering this external physical material world. But we are confused. The material world has its objective qualities. But the more you zoom in, the more you realize it's not what it appears to be. The more you zoom in, the more you realize it's just empty. Until you get all the way down to the molecular, the atomic, and the subatomic level, and you say, oh my God, this is all 99% open space. Don't believe me? Google it, check it out. On the subatomic level, the most solid objects, iron, steel, platinum, lead, titanium, are 99% open space. And the teeny tiny little particles, the electrons, and even below that, the quarks and muons and these subatomic particles are not really particles at all. They're little vortices of energy. And you'll remember we talked about the double slit experiment, which made it pretty patently clear, quite obvious, that these electrons, or it could be photons, whatever subatomic particle you choose to shoot through these double slits and then look for their impact on the back wall, you will get a twofold pattern resembling those slits as long as you're observing with some sort of particle detector the passage of these particles through one slit or the other, or it actually turns out both slits or neither. And it's only when you stop looking that those two slits become many, in what's known as an interference pattern, which demonstrates that it's really energy, like waves of water. If you drop two pebbles in a pool of water at the same time, those ripples intersect, and in some cases they add together and increase the amplitude, and in some instances they cancel each other out, and so you get these stripes. An interference pattern suggests these are not particles that are passing through the slits, they're just energy. The world is not what it appears to be. It's a perception. It's an illusion. And so believing that our problems come from the world and we've got to fix the world and manage the world, today's word is control the world to solve the problem or to create happiness or justice or peace in our lives, is an understandable mistake. Instead, reality is within. Christ said the kingdom is within. He said, if heaven was above you, the birds would know it before you. If heaven were below you, the fishes would be there before you. The kingdom is within you and without you. It's everywhere equally present. It's in the Gnostic Gospels, so you don't hear about it from the fundamentalists or most Christian preachers. They ignore the Gnostic Gospels. It's in the Apocrypha, though. Book of Thomas. Check it out. Google the Book of Thomas. Read it. It's short. You read it in 5 minutes. Control is self-control. Control is controlling your mind. And that comes from being the observer more than the participant. To be the awareness is to be the consciousness, is to stand at the fundamental source of all that exists. The brain does not generate consciousness. It filters it. Consciousness is not an epiphenomena of brain chemistry. In fact, it's quite the other way around. The brain and everything that exists in the physical world is a phenomena of consciousness. Double slit proves it. Quantum physics proves it. Accepting responsibility for your life proves it in some rather remarkable ways. Forgive us if we're not masters. I asked Doreen to play Fantasia for me the other day. We got the Disney Channel without commercials. And I said, oh boy, let's watch some old Disney stuff. How about Fantasia? And there's that section in Fantasia, I'm sure you remember, where the Sorcerer's Apprentice, where the wizard goes for a nap, and Mickey Mouse, the apprentice, puts the wizard's hat on and commands the mop and the pail to clean up. But then Mickey falls asleep, and the mop and the pail just keep going and going and going. They're not being controlled. They're not being managed, because Mickey's got the hat, but he's not the wizard. He's just a stupid apprentice. And so Mickey gets an axe and hits the mop with the axe, and splinters and breaks into 100 pieces, all of which then become mops and the pails in the same way. Now there's 100 and then 1,000 mops and pails, and the place gets flooded. Meanwhile, all this beautiful classical music is swelling in the background. So that's us. We're the Sorcerer's Apprentice. They say, well, what good is this visualization for healing or for problem solving? Let's move beyond healing to solving any problem with consciousness, with mind control, self-mind control. Just because you're not perfect, just because you're not a friggin' wizard, you're not a master, you're not Jesus, you can't walk on water or multiply the fishes and the loaves or heal the blind man with mud, doesn't mean we don't have access to it and that we can develop it and that's what we're here to do, is to figure this stuff out. So what does it mean to control the mind rather than the world? To control the inside so as to affect the outside. To understand that if you want to edit the film, you don't run to the screen and manipulate the reflected light on the wall. You go back to the projection booth, which is its source. What does that mean? And how can we remember it? Well, I developed an acrostic based on the word brain, and I put it in my book, Fearless Intelligence, and several people have told me over the years, the book's been out 8 years now, that they find this very helpful. And it's to use the word brain, B-R-A-I-N, to remember these 5 steps. For managing your life, for finding control in your perception and response. So first, let me remind you that between stimulus and response, there is a space. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. There is a space between what happens to you and what you do with it. But for most of us, most of the time, it's an infinitesimally small place that leads to reflexive reactions. Knee-jerk. Without thought. Why did you do that? Because I felt like it. He said in a very defensive way. I did it because I felt like it. Yeah, well, did you think before? No, I didn't. I felt like it, I did it, and then thought about it later. Well, that's out of order. You're supposed to think about it, consider the consequences, recognize that you have more choices than are immediately apparent, and then choose and initiate. But that requires that we open up that space so that we pause before we react. Right? So it's stimulus perception response. And while we cannot control the stimulus, sometimes we have an ability to influence or persuade, But when it comes right down to it, you could point a gun at somebody's head and not have control. And look at how much of our lives is a struggle for controlling what's done to us. It's a fool's errand. Besides, it's already happened. How are you going to control something that's already downstream? What you want to control, what we wish to learn to be better and better at controlling, is our perception and response. It's not the stimulus. And yet, look at our tendency, because we're on autopilot and we're still driven by these animalistic urges, to fixate on the stimulus. Oh, he made me angry. She made me jealous. They made me feel. Really? How'd they do that? What is this extraordinary power that we give away to other people to hurt us? When no one, in truth, can make us feel inferior or hurt us emotionally without our consent. If somebody insults you and it hurts, it's because you're not clear. Maybe they have a point. What if they're right? When we know ourselves and know the truth humbly, not arrogantly, nobody can hurt us. And instead of getting angry, we look at them insulting us with compassion and recognize their suffering and their pathetic efforts to break us down because they don't know how to build themselves up. And we remember that we have an ego too. And that's what it's always doing. Instead of controlling the stimulus, controlling other people, controlling the world, and turning our lives into a struggle, you choose your attitude, your perspective, your point of view, and you choose your response and initiate that. And so here's what BRAIN stands for. The B is for breathe. The R is for relax. The A is for accept and acknowledge. The I is for initiate. And the N is for no worries. Or in the book, I think I used to say, nix negativity. If you know the word nix. No negativity. No worries. Breathe. When facing a problem, whether it's a problem that needs to be solved or heartache that needs to be healed, use this brain acrostic. First thing you do is breathe and relax. It makes you smarter. It expands awareness. Breathe, B, R, relax. Feel the letting go. Acknowledge reality. Accept it. It's a point of departure. It's not your destination. You're not giving up or giving in. You're getting real. Breathe, relax, accept. B-R-A-I. Initiate. Don't react. Don't react reflexively. Respond consciously. Initiate your choice. Aren't you tired of dancing to other people's tunes? And struggling to please unpleasable people? To earn their acceptance and approval so you feel okay about yourself? We're working the program backwards. Initiate your response. And then no worries. B-R-A-I-N, the brain acrostic. Breathe, relax, acknowledge, and accept. Initiate, no worries. Remember that. Practice that. He who teaches learns twice. Tell other people about it. Initiate a discussion. Do what they think. Don't argue, just offer it to them. You may get argument, that's okay. You're not invested in it, you're not selling it. I just think it's a good way to remember the formula for turning your life around and for replacing the struggle to manage the world and control the world, which is undoable and impossible, with self-control.
Wow.